Actually, this is a very important topic for the Skier Hosting Alliance. And one of the things I'd like the panel to do is introduce themselves and also just kind of start out by answering the question, what role should all of the players in the infrastructure stack play in securing WordPress? So to start with you, Miriam.
Okay, hi, I'm Miriam Schwab. I'm head of WordPress at Elementor. Elementor is the leading page builder and plugin for WordPress. We power 30% of WordPress and 13% of the web. Our role as a company with such large scale is that we have a ton of responsibility in maintaining a high level of security for our users, because if there's any misses there, then that could cause a lot of issues. So we need to make sure that security is approached very seriously before deployment. But because we're an open source plugin and anyone can access our code, including malicious actors, we need to make sure that we have really good processes in place in case something happens after. Being in the open source space takes, has different challenges and opportunities, and in security, it's definitely something that needs almost a unique approach. So that's what I have to say about that.
Okay. How about you, Igor?
I've been in the business of in the hosting for since '97. So if you can count, it's like numbers too big. And today we protect about 60 million websites. 60% of that, for instance, are WordPress websites. That's the ratio of WordPress websites on majority of shared hosting providers. We've been doing it for what, like last 10 years, and echo.
His microphone's too hot.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, I think that's good. Good. Yeah, let's hope that's good. No, that's not good. Am I talking too loud? Anyway, so I probably, yeah, they don't want me to talk.
People behind stage, there's a feedback, something happening.
Yeah, we have a strong feedback loop. Is it better now?
That's better.
Yeah. Okay, let me keep it close. So for the past 10 years, we were protecting lots and lots and lots of websites. And what we constantly see is a desire from hosters to say users should learn and users should pay. We believe that users will not pay, users will not learn, and it's a responsibility of a service provider to fix the problem. I'll pass the torch to you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Oliver. I'm the co-founder of PatchTech. And PatchTech essentially is a threat intelligence company. So we are focusing on vulnerability intelligence, making sure that we are helping plugin developers to essentially find and fix security vulnerabilities. We partner with over 1,000 plugins, including Elementor. And yeah, like we work with web hosting companies to essentially mitigate security vulnerabilities in the websites before the hackers had time to exploit them. So the speed to mitigation is really everything that we are focusing on. And I think we are on the other side of the coin where we are trying to actually bring this responsibility more to the users, or at least for them to understand that they need to invest in security.
Hi, I'm Robbie Adair, and I have a web agency called Media A-Team that I've had for 24 years. So I've built a couple of websites, and I also have a training company called OS Training where we train web development. And security obviously is important with both of those, and I think the responsibility of security is multifaceted because it's obviously, as an agency, you also need to look at all those different facets, because there is where you're choosing to host, what are the tools that host is using that's helping to secure it, or the tools you need to implement that the host is not going to do, that you need to do yourself. You need to make sure your developers understand, and even your designers, everyone who's going to touch that site needs to understand security, even if it's as simple as don't use password as your password. There's that level, and then if you're talking about building agents, like an agency building for other people, you also need to educate your clients on how they and their users need to try and keep their website safe too. And so security is everybody's responsibility, quite honestly, in my opinion. And there needs to be education wrapped around that for all the different levels.
So if security is everybody's responsibility, how do you manage the flow of information between the different providers, right? So that folks aren't siloed. I mean, how would you take a shot at that, Robbie?
So like when we finish a website for a client, we will do training for them afterwards. As we're building that website, depending on how complex the website is, we may engage outside vendors to help us make sure that, especially if we've had to do some custom work in it, then we may have them, someone else take a look at it and just see, did we do a good job? Is there something we missed? And then again, it is making sure that we made the right decision, or if we didn't make the right decision on a host, getting them to somewhere where it is the right decision. And I mean, and it's every part of that. So like if you're talking WordPress, it's every plugin that you've installed into that. You need to make sure you made the right choices and that they're making the right choices and keeping their product secure. If you're in Joomla extensions, same thing. Drupal, same thing. You need to make sure whatever you're using out there, they're doing their due diligence as well.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we talk about in the Secure Hosting Alliance is how to facilitate information flow among providers. Do you have any advice how to do that amongst yourselves?
Well, I can talk to our partnership with PatchStack if that's what you're referring to. We have to make sure that the information is flowing between us. Yeah, and between us and our users.
Okay.
So we've set up a very good workflow with them involving shared channels and shared communication where issues are brought up, dealt with, and then communicated internally and externally in a pretty thorough and clear manner, depending on the needs. And then also communicating to our end users any information that they need to know about security. So that's maybe a different player. I'm not sure if that's what you mean, but you know, we communicate in different ways depending on the severity of any issue. Thank God we haven't had a severe one in quite a long time. But there's like, I think in security, in the world of security and open source and WordPress specifically, there's a need to balance sharing information around security without causing panic. There's a lot of conversation about, well, WordPress isn't secure. Well, WordPress is actually pretty secure. A lot of the issues come from plugins or people, you know, not knowing how to properly manage their site, having weak passwords, or not having two-factor authentication, or who knows what, or too many users in their WordPress site that are high level. Like there's a whole, you know, world of things. So on the one hand, WordPress is secure. On the other hand, it can have issues, but we don't want people to be running, screaming away from it because there is security issues. So it's like finding that balance of like, here's what you need to know, and here's how you can be responsible, but also no need to panic. It's fine.
Okay, so I'm a lawyer, and lawyers sell fear and panic. Kind of that's my job is to sow the seeds of panic. How do you strike that balance? Like Igor, how do you strike the balance of talking about security issues and not causing panic?
So we don't talk about security issues. We tell customer what to do when we need customer to do something. We tell hosters what to do when hoster needs to do something. For example, simple example, when we know that customer password is hacked already or they're using quick-cut password, we will not let them log in until they change the password. They have to change the password until they log in. So we force them. Sometimes we see that they have some admin tools that are easily, that are hackers using to breach their website are installed on them. We would force them to either password protect those tools or to remove those tools because we know otherwise they will be abused. So we're not communicating them in vague terms of, hey, you're under risk, you need to keep updated. We're telling them exact things they have to do to continue being secure. We really, like, once again, the whole idea of everyone has to be responsible. There is a saying, if everyone is responsible, no one is responsible. We don't believe in that. We believe that we are responsible for making sure that hosts will be able to provide secure hosting. So we take this responsibility and we will involve and tell host, we will tell website owner what to do in exact way, in automated way, but we will tell them exactly what to do. Update plugin, not to run the plugin, etc., etc.
So how about you? How do you strike that balance, Oliver?
Maybe first to kind of like go to the point that Miriam was talking about, like shared communication. I think, you know, when we talk about responsibility, I think a shared communication is also something that is very important. Like, for example, at PatchStack, we are not only working with, you know, many web hosting companies, but we are also working with other security companies. So PatchStack is working with, you know, Solid Security. I think we have some friends in the audience. We are working closely with, you know, Monarchs. We're working with different security providers and sharing information and knowledge and things like that. And I think that is super important as well, because ultimately, like, we are all the defenders in this space, and we need to make sure that we are capable of, you know, making each other basically aware of the new threats that are happening. And, you know, threats landscape is changing quite a lot. But yeah, ultimately, if you want to, if someone needs to take responsibility, then ultimately it also boils down to who has control. Like, if I don't have control, then I cannot take responsibility over something that I don't have control over. And now there is this tricky situation where when we are talking about customers that are using web hosting, they have complete and full control over the website. So how do you, if someone has a full control over the website, how can you not have any responsibility on them? I don't think that cannot really work. I believe that the customers will need to become aware of their responsibility, and then they can make the decision whether they allocate that responsibility to someone else or they are, you know, doing it on their own. So I think there ultimately needs to be this kind of, ultimately it's like sharing knowledge, and we need to make sure that people understand where their own responsibility is and then make the decision whether they want to be responsible or not.
Okay, so Miriam, one of the things that you talked about was kind of marketing WordPress and WordPress being secure or insecure. I mean, how does marketing play into this kind of trust issues?
A lot of what impacts trust in anything is communication and reputation, which is connected to communication. So how do we communicate in a way that shows that we're taking security seriously? It's a top priority, but also transparently, almost radically transparently, sharing information around security issues and not hiding it. Hiding security issues or like trying to take care of it without, you know, maybe notifying people as much as possible or in the right way is not going to work. And people might feel that to engender trust, we should not talk about these issues, but actually sharing issues, saying this is how we're going to fix it, this is what the steps we're going to take to make sure it doesn't happen again, partnerships that we form to add another layer of security, things like that, like with PatchStack. All of that, it says we're taking responsibility, we're recognizing it, we're not hiding it, and that in itself can actually create trust rather than trying to hide things.
So how do you see trust working, Robbie?
You know, with our clients, so we've got from small clients all the way to extremely large clients. And so, like, when I'm talking to one of our large clients, I mean, there are other people in that meeting typically from the IT department, sometimes the head of the IT department, because they know they're ultimately going to be audited, and so they want to make sure that whatever the marketing department or whatever department that's talking to us has engaged us to do, that we are going to take security seriously. And it is some transparency. You can't say, oh, don't worry, what we build, you'll never get hacked. I mean, that you just never say that, because you will break trust if you do that. And so you have to be sincere in saying, yes, there could be vulnerabilities here, especially if you're putting together a WordPress site and you've got multiple plugins and things like that, that when they do that audit, especially if they haven't been good at keeping it up to date and things like that, it may hit something. But then what you just say is, if it happens, you let us know, we're going to find the corrective action to take. And then, by the way, on the flip side of that, I mean, we've had, I think at least 3 of our clients have had some pretty major audits done on WordPress sites. And what we've been able to do, because they'll send us a spreadsheet of the results from it, and they're like, fix it. Not only do we fix it, if it's something we need to fix ourselves, we fix it ourselves. But if it is things that, you know, it came through a plugin, I contact that plugin and I send them that information. I'm like, my client found this in their audit, you know, and they fix it. I mean, and then it builds more trust, because I go back to the client and I'm like, hey, yeah, I reported this to Elementor and they fixed it, and you're all good to go again, as well as it's there now to protect you in the future. If another problem pops up, we'll send it to whoever. And so doing that, I mean, like I said, you can't say it's not going going to happen. You just have to say, we will figure out a way to fix this if it happens. And your smaller companies, they don't have anyone to audit them. But by, again, these audits, if we could make, and I do think that there would be that would be a great thing. There's just a handful of the big audit companies, if they would just turn that data back over to everyone to let them know what they found out there, it would also help us. So get on that, David.
Yeah, I'll be working on that
Okay,
right after
perfect.
this session. So, it sounds to me like transparency and trust, or particularly transparency, needs to be somewhat context aware in terms of what you disclose and how it's disclosed. But so, in thinking about trust and thinking about disclosure, kind of what role do governments play and government regulation play here? I mean, where should regulators be involved and where should they not be involved? Igor?
What a great question. So I think if government is not involved, that's a blessing, and we should strive to make sure that governments are not involved. But if you don't mind, I'll change it a little bit. I think what governments for us is not governments, it's Google. It's sites that bring traffic, because they are what's policing the website. That's what are saying, hey, your site is infected, I'm not going to bring you traffic. And we need to make sure that they trust hosting more, that they're not blocking sites for no reason when there is no malware. And they do that sometimes, more often, less often. And we need to collaborate closely with them to make sure that it's a single ecosystem. It's not like they're on their own, we're on our own, and the customer in between without knowledge how to deal with it.
Okay, so how about you, Oliver? Where should the line be?
I really like that topic, like compliance. Well,
Welcome to Europe.
yeah, welcome to Europe. Yeah. So, PatchTech was I think 3 or 4 years ago actually funded by European government because the EU was creating this new legislation or the law called Cyber Resilience Act,
right.
And this was passed last year. And something that they had a worry with already was WordPress in terms of like, okay, we are creating this law where we are bringing this responsibility of application security, similar way how the GDPR did it with data security and personal data. So Cyber Resilience Act is bringing this basically into like into software security and into digital products. And then that is actually how we started building this MVDP platform, for example, that Elementor is using, and 1,000 other WordPress plugins are using to basically control the flow of how security vulnerabilities are being reported and so forth. But what we do see is like has been like a very significant shift even about talking about this, where plugin developers have actually started auditing their plugins. They have actually taken like a proactive stance in terms of, okay, we need to secure our code base. We actually need to know what's going to happen when someone is going to report the vulnerability into our software. What is the process going to look like? How it's going to be actually mitigated and patched eventually, right? So the whole process needs to be kind of like mapped out. And something that we need to think about is like in June 2026, so next year, the first obligations are going to kick in, which are, for example, every digital product needs to have a VTP. So this is going to be a mandatory thing to have like vulnerability management and processing handling. So this is something
Open source also? I think they excluded small open source project from that completely.
Yes, small open source project only when they are completely non-commercial. And that is now, this is a really good point, because everyone is thinking, like, I like that this CRA starts with like, free and open source software is excluded, and then it's like, except they are commercial. And when we're talking about WordPress plugins, for example, especially like popular ones, basically everyone who has like a free version and the premium version, they are actually considered manufacturers by the Cyber Resilience Act, not the open source software stewards, and they need to be fully obliged to they need to go through the entire compliance. So I think it's going to ultimately make the ecosystem more secure. What is a big question about this specific Cyber Resilience Act, for example, is whether websites are going to be considered digital products. And this is something that is now coming up in December, where with additional information is when an agency sells a website to their customer, whether this is now considered a digital product that an agency sells, and if so, there is going to be a significant compliance impact also on agencies building websites.
Can I add?
Sure.
I think, so I've very much into that act as well, read it inside and out, and I think it will make software as much more secure as cookies law made tracking less tracking, or GDPR made private information less available to the crooks. I think it's a typical European regulation game that brings nothing but pain. But
there is one very big difference between GDPR and Cyber Resilience Act, is that with GDPR, you can make a straight face and say that, oh, we have all the data processing internally sorted out, and yeah, we're super like GDPR compliant and things like that. But with Cyber Resilience Act, you can check from the outside whether you have a VDP set up, whether you are basically releasing software updates, security updates separately from regular releases, things like that. And have you seen what is happening with the Accessibility Act? I think, you're a lawyer.
That's another thing which I think is nonsense. So yeah. I think it will, like,
but it's
one
gonna
of
have an
those
impact.
things, like, you know how you have water bottles which like stick, it's as useful.
So Igor, to kind of follow on.
I'm not a big fan of regulations.
No
sorry.
kidding.
fair.
So where does self-regulation play in this?
So I actually want to give an example of where government needed to step in
Okay.
the security space, which was a very interesting incident. The CV database. So the CV database is just, it's super critical. It's almost infrastructure for the security space. And, issues are stored there or recorded there, and it's really important that it's publicly available, and it's important that that system works. And then they were running out of funding. And the American government was backing it and was like, nah, or something like that, right?
CISA.
And what was it? It was, yeah.
Yeah, it was CISA that was essentially like cut the funding, but I think they restored it.
So they restored it, but for like a minute there, it was like panic, for real, but like legitimately so, because this super important resource was just gonna, go down?
Mm-hmm.
Like was the security space going to continue to function without it? And then the American government, which is crazy that it was all dependent on the American government, but good job, American government. They stepped in and they said, okay, we got this. We see that this is important, obviously, for governments as well, and got it up and running. So there are instances where the government is critical, and that kind of regulation is critical. Also, on the one hand, I'm against too much regulation as well. It tends to interfere in many ways. But on the other hand, we can't fully trust that everyone's going to take the proper responsibility. Security is the kind of thing that falls behind because, a company that's building, especially in the early stages, they're like running after revenue, running after customers, and as long as there's not a security issue, everything is fine. Kind of like your branding. This is fine until everything isn't fine, and then when everything isn't fine, who gets affected aside from the business? They're end users whose potentially sensitive data is exposed and released, and their passwords are now part of like these data dumps and who knows what. And so in order to protect the security of users, I think, unfortunately, or just it's typically, you can't expect that people are going to make security top priority when they should. So that's just some thoughts about that.
So Robbie, how and when do your clients make security a priority? What triggers that?
When their site goes down.
When their site goes
First,
down, right?
first
yeah.
ransom attack. After that, they take security very seriously.
I was going to say, they do ask, right? But typically, who you're working with, they have no clue. They wouldn't even know if there was any compliances they need to be hitting. That's the other problem. I mean, we can make rules all day long, but if we don't actually educate people out there and get that word out there, what they are, they're never going to know. And in the U.S., we're really bad because we love litigation, sorry, but we do. He's a lawyer. And so that's usually how people find out. I mean, think about accessibility. Accessibility was almost non-existent in the U.S. on websites until all the lawsuits started happening. Now that scared people, businesses, into actually thinking, oh, maybe we should look and see what are the rules, what are the laws.
But you know about those lawsuits? Have you read about it? It was 3 guys who were running a scam. They were just going after websites and demanding
Oh, I know
money
which
and
one you're
suing
talking
them
about.
in particular price. They were suing sites that had like no one who is blind would ever use the sites. Like was They gave an example, some like high-end skiing site, which like you cannot do it blind or without eyesight, but they were suing them because it's not accessible. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
but
disagree, but
think-
it's
yeah,
kind of
but
funny.
I think so. If they're like GDPR, well, and I guess California in our country
Yes.
would be the one that has the most regulations and rules that they're coming up with for websites, and a lot of it is about some of it's accessibility, but a lot of it is about security. But it's kind of weird. It's like I said, they come up with these things here, and we have rules, but no one seems to know them. No one seems to be following anything until they're not.
So, all right. So, litigation is a big stick, and it's a very expensive stick. How do you facilitate security literacy? How do you begin to teach your end users that they need to take it seriously?
Good question.
I'm happy to take it. I think they're taking it seriously. We're talking about something that was 3, 5, 10 years ago. Today, with constant ransomware attacks, websites being infected and blocked from the search engines, etc., it's just happening. We're on the in the place where security demand is significantly outstripping any regulations. Like there is more demand for security than there is regulations for the security. Even European government is behind with what European companies are doing from the security standpoint, because they know that their neighbor was just hit, like Jaguar, take Jaguar. They were hit with a ransomware attacks that shut down their plants and they lost $2.5 billion. How much money every manufacturing company right now is putting into their security? Huge. Same with the websites, because they know that they're gonna get delisted and they're starting to worry and they're willing to pay, and we're seeing that. We're seeing people paying premium for website security.
I think it's the same thing with like cybersecurity, like certificates and certifications, is that you shouldn't really do security because of certification. You shouldn't also do security just for a fucking regulation. You should do but the regulation should give you a framework. Like if you don't know what to do, then it should give you a framework of how you could, do it maybe in a better way.
That's
like
how
a direction,
we have cookie
right?
law.
Yeah. Well, but we cannot deny that the GDPR had a huge impact on the web.
Negative or positive?
Well, both, I think. Because we've had, I still like the GDPR fine tracker website where it shows live feed of companies that are getting fined. Like, I'm not in favor of just like you making bunch of money of finding companies, but at the same time, there's a lot of personal data that is out there, and there's a lot of those. We used to have like a lot of platforms basically store passwords and plain text and things like that together with like personal data. Like after GDPR, this was one of the pushers where there was like very certain and specific kind of pressure for everyone to take care of. Like, okay, how are we actually storing data? And if we're talking about like websites getting hacked through the leaked passwords, like this is also one of the reasons behind that, because that level of security failed. So there is going to be basically damage coming out of the other end of the tube, right? So I think ultimately, yeah, we need the compliance in that regard is just essentially like a framework to help people think about security who are maybe not necessarily don't know where to get started.
So I actually think that it is our responsibility to make sure our users' experience is secure. If you think about it, people who have, in our space, websites, they have a shop, they have a business, they're not going to be security experts, and they shouldn't be expected to be security experts. When they use a SaaS product, when they use their Gmail's, Gmail has like a checklist of things that you can go into once in a while, but basically it comes down to have 2FA, and now Gmail enforces it, we should be enforcing it, and don't reuse your passwords. And people will still reuse their passwords, but Google will try to protect the users from themselves in that regard as well. And I think that we, on the infrastructure level, need to be protecting our users and not expecting them to know much beyond, like, have a good password, kind of thing, and use 2FA, because they're not going to be able to, and putting the onus of that on them is not going to work out. So hosting providers have taken a lot of the responsibility for security on themselves. When I started out in this space, people's websites were getting hacked left, right, and center. It was ridiculous, and sites were getting hacked, and then the site next to them was getting hacked, and it was just wild. And then the hosting provider's like, oh, I guess maybe we should do something about that. And they started to put in more and more protective layers.
And then they offer SSL.
And then they offer SSL.
SSL.
Yeah.
No, SSL was before that. I mean,
Yeah.
SSL still makes sense because you need to like protect the password.
No, then you can get hacked through a secure channel.
Right. But in any case, all these types of things, I think it's not the users. They're not security experts. They don't have to be, and we need to protect them as much as possible. And that's with some basic security awareness. And that's where it ends.
With that being said, particularly talking about WordPress, I do think that agencies that are building for their clients, or if they're building it themselves, they need to be thinking about user permission levels. Not everybody needs to be an administrator on these websites. As a matter of fact, we rarely give our clients a full administrator role unless they're pretty techy, because they can really mess something up, right? As well as it's a vulnerability and they probably don't have a good password, even if you've told them they have to be. So I think that that's part of also keeping that WordPress secure, is if you just create those user roles to only do what they're supposed to do, so that the people that are logging in posting posts, they don't need to be able to turn the entire website off or anything. So
I'm so glad that at the end everyone came back to my point that we should be responsible, not the end user.
Yes, Igor, you are always right.
Sometimes, but yeah.
We're just here to agree with you.
Otherwise, we would have to talk for another 35 minutes.
Okay, assuming that Igor is right, being a litigator, so let's say that security becomes just the norm among hosts. What's their differentiator, right? Like hosts are selling their services for $1.99. What differentiates them then?
How do cars differentiate in the level of safety? Not much. I mean, everyone has seat belt and airbags, etc. There is like levels because a bunch of things, but there shouldn't be much differentiation in terms of security. Sites should be secured. Like, I think it's better for everyone.
So for those who know or don't know, I founded a company in the hosting space that published WordPress sites in a static architecture. And one of the reasons for that, the main motivation, was security. And then when we were marketing Stratic, it was called Stratic, we would say it was fast, secure, and scalable for real, because every hosting company said that. But our architecture made it actually for real, because there's no attack surface practically and no endpoints. And anyways, I'm not going to get into the technicalities of it. But in the end, everyone's going to say the same things in the hosting space. Everyone's fast, secure, and reliable. Okay, please. But it's like you're going to have to look into reviews and speak to people who really know and like find out what's for real. Security is basic. It should be basic. At least some level of it, and then if they actually follow through, that's what matters. And you can't trust the marketing messaging. You have to like ask people.
Are you saying marketing might be somewhat deceiving?
I think if someone is marketing in a way that they're lying, it's going to come back at them. But everyone is like somewhat true. It's like we're like faster than those guys. We're slower than them. We're more secure than those guys. We're less secure than them. There's always a scale. So there's some truth to it. But then in the end, I guess we all have to kind of do our own research or something.
People, when they're picking their host, they look and they count the number of nines behind the 99.9999999. That's what all the ads, every single one of them. So they're just like, well, this one has the most nines. It's got to be the most secure.
I love 99999 marketing. That's like my favorite thing. Okay, Oliver.
No, I think there's like, if someone is going to tell you that they're offering like 100% security and they're guarantee security to you, like you should like walk with a very big kind of like, just like keep away from that, because it's just not possible when it comes to security. And I think when we talk about responsibility, I think Igor is right that we are responsible, but I think we are responsible of making our like the users and the website owners understand that they are ultimately also responsible. Because if we are not letting people know that they are responsible for what they actually control, then they are going to dismiss security, and it can only go one way.
Okay, so I think my task for the next panel I moderate is to demonstrate how Igor can be wrong, because Igor is always right. All right, I appreciate everybody being on my panel. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the audience. If you'll give my panel a round of applause, please.